Hey everybody, welcome to Bandite's Procedural Eye tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to make these eyes procedurally. They look nice, don't they? They're my new eyes. I don't need my old eyes. Why have normal eyes if you can have eyes in Blender? So, just sit back, relax, and follow along, guys. So, we got our default scene here. This is Blender 2.8, for everybody's wondering. And first we're gonna delete the default cube, right? Now we're just gonna add a UV sphere, right? We're just gonna rotate it by 90 degrees on the x-axis, so it just points forward, like an eye would. Alright, next step, we wanna model the eye before we shade it, of course. So it has a correct shape and the light, goes into it correctly. We'll just go into edit mode and we're just going to use this loop cut and kind of put it a little bit more up somewhere. This will differ on what kind of eye you're making. If you're going cartoony or more realistic, just look up reference of an eye and then just check where that falls, right? We're just going to put it around here. Right, seems correct. Yes, and let's just select this one, press Ctrl B, just to have a little bit more edge loops here. We're gonna select the middle vertex here. We're gonna put on our procedural, proportional editing, sorry. Too much procedural going on. Proportional editing, you can put this on with O. And we're gonna put this on inverse square. This will allow us to invert it the other way. So we get a perfect sphere once we're at the other end. So I'm gonna scroll just to about where that edge is. If you want to get a clear view on that, go into side view and then make sure your border of your proportional editing is just about that edge. Just to fine tune it, hold shift and then scroll. You can just around there, right? Another thing, you can put on wireframe. And now we can perfectly see what's going on. We can look how many, it takes about 1, 2, 3 squares on the grid. We can go 1, 2, 3, and then we have a somewhat perfect indent into the eye. You can make this deeper or more shallow if you want. It's all about stylistic choices, you know. I'm going to move this edge a little bit up with hitting G twice. And I'm going to select this one. And I'm going to hit Ctrl B to bevel. And scroll up once to add another edge loop. And we want to make this about yay thick. Alright. So second thing we want to insert in here is the lens. The way we'll do that is about the same. So we'll go about, let's say, this edge. And let's just first bevel this edge again, just to have enough loop cuts. Let's check if that's still smooth. Yeah. We kind of want these to be square. It doesn't really matter, but, you know, it looks a bit nicer and makes the curve a little bit smoother. So I'm just going to move this one a little bit more inwards. There we go. And now I want this edge to be the edge of the lens. So I'm going to go G, Y, and I'm going to move it forward so it sticks out just a little bit. I see that the middle one still needs to be moved. Can do a little bit of tweaking. Another thing you can do is just select those faces, and if you have your loop tools enabled, these should be enabled by default in Blender 2.8. Otherwise, check your preferences. But we go to loop tools and go to flatten. Now it's flattened. Then maybe you can push it a little bit outward. Like this. Right. Of course, we want to shade this smooth. So if you press W in your object context menu, press shade smooth. And then of course, the edge of the lens, we kind of want to sharpen as well. So I'll add 2 more edge loops to that. That looks very nice. All right. There's one more thing we need to add to the model of the eye. We actually need to add a second object. It's going to be our outer eyeball. So that's going to be our eyeball with our lens, and it's going to make the eye nice and shiny. So we're just going to add another UV sphere. And you can also rotate this on the x-axis by 90 degrees. It's not really necessary. And you can scale it up, let's say 1.02, right? This will make it just, if you look on the side view here, it will make it just a little bit bigger than the eyeball, right? Okay. All right. So we're just gonna hide this for now. And with this one selected, we'll go into our shading panel up top. I'm gonna start procedurally shading. Oh, but first we want to UV edit it actually. Although this is procedural, we want to UV edit it to make some things easier. So we're just gonna select our, it's a very easy unwrap. Select our middle edge here, press Ctrl E for edge, mark seam, and we're just gonna press A to select the entire, all the vertices, and press U for unwrap. There we go. So now what I wanna do is select my islands up here, select this one, press UV, and pack islands. So it's nicely fit in the middle of our image. The other sphere, whoops, we kind of want to turn off our proportional editing, but we just want to scale it down and put it in the corner here. It's not really going to be visible normally, except if you're making, of course, an eye that popped out of somebody's skull, in which case this will still work, of course. So let's go to shading finally. And let's give this a new material. And we're just going to call this material I, or matte-I. We're also going to rename this object, of course. So we're going to call this I-inner. And the other one that's hidden, I-outer. Now comes the exciting part. We first want to separate the three areas that need three different colors, basically. We have our eyeball that's going to be white with going to some red or some purple to the back. Then we have our iris, and we have our lens that's black in the middle. To separate these, we're just going to use a gradient texture, that is. Just going to pop it in here. I have Node Wrangler turned on, so if you want to follow along with the same shortcuts, enable Node Wrangler. And then from this gradient, we want to put this on spherical, right? I'm just going to press Ctrl T, and it's going to bring up the mapping and texture coordinate node. I want to put this on UV. Then I want to center this spherical node. So I'm going to put the X and Y location to -0.5 and -0.5. Because the spherical gradient texture starts at 0, 0, but we want to start it in the middle of our UV texture. Let me just make a simple plane. Rotate it as well. And let's assign it the same material, the matte I, so you can see what we're doing here. So if I just go back, if I turn this to 0, the gradient will start from the middle. But we want it to start from the center of our UV map. So what we can do now is add a color ramp, right? And if we slide it down, you can see we can select different parts of our eye. So because we don't want to play around in this area of the color ramp, because this is going to be a little bit hard to control, I'm going to add a little trick I found to make it a little bit easier. Just adding a math node. Put this on power, and let's put this on 3. So now you can see the control of everything that we need, the lens and the iris, it's just going to be here. It's going to make sense in a second, if it doesn't already. So first in the color ramp, we want to add a red color, right? Then we want to add 2 green colors. So I'm going to press this twice, and green. And then the last one, I just want to be blue. Okay. And now we want to position these so that the lens is blue and the iris is green and the rest of the eye is red. So to make sure, I mean, because this is a little bit, it seems correct, but let's make sure and enable in our viewport overlays here, geometry. Yeah, like this. And then we can really see where our edges are. So we see that the iris is a little bit more forward. We want to leave a little bit of gradient between those, because the eye isn't perfectly, you know, doesn't go from one to the other. So if you want to fine tune this, you can also select it, go to the position, hold shift, and then drag it. In some cases, it's going to be a little bit easier. Then our other one, we just want to go to the edge here as well, and have a small gradient going over it. All right, so now this looks like a very creepy eye. Let's disable our wireframe. And what we can do now is go to converter, separate RGB, and now we basically have masks for 3 areas. So, of course, we want to arrange this nicely. So we'll add a frame. Let's select our nodes here. Press Ctrl P, and then if you open up the N panel, just add a label, divider. I don't know what to call this. This is called divider. There we go. All right. So now we want to add the iris. So how do we add a procedural iris that looks nice? So first, we're going to converter, color ramp, and converter. What am I saying? Texture, gradient. Right. I'm just going to pop this in here already. And with the gradient texture, we're going to press Ctrl T, and we're going to put this on the UV. And we want to put this on -5 again. So we could basically take this vector node, pop it in here. But yeah, I like to have it separated. And we want to put the style on, let's see here, radial. What this will do is basically make a radial gradient that goes around. The reason I need the color ramp is because I want to smoothen this out. So I'm going to move the white to the middle. I'm going to move another black one to the right. So now this transitions smoothly. And what we're going to do next is add 2 textures, which is a noise texture and a Voronoi texture. There we go. And we want to add a mix RGB, so we can mix the color ramp of our wipe here to our UV, and we can mix the two. That will look kind of weird, but if we pop it into the noise texture, and the Voronoi texture is basically this, then we get this weird spirally thing, because the vectors are being influenced by the radial wipe here. So also for a noise texture, we see some funky stuff happening here. Cool. So we kind of want to play with this of how much this affects. I think you can see the best results on the Voronoi texture. We just want to see how much it distorts on the eye then. And then we want to increase the scale on the Voronoi. You can already see what we're going for here. So let's put a little bit more, because we kind of want to keep these circle, which are typical for an iris. But I think I just want to put this up more. I will see it once we got there. We can tweak it further down the lane. We also have our noise texture here. And this is just to add some extra noise, because the eyes aren't perfect. Just want to pump up the scale, pump up the detail. Maybe you can add some distortion for some interesting effects going on. Right? There you go. Then of course we want to add a mix RGB and add the factor of the noise to, well, just the color. It's black and white anyway. And in here we see then we kind of have a mix of the two. Kind of want to tend to go to the Voronoi texture a bit, but that we have the detail of the noise in here as well. So the only thing we need then is to add a color ramp. And let's push our nodes back here a little bit. And in this color ramp, we're going to define the eye color. Let's just go for blue eyes now. So our darker colors, maybe somewhere in here. And here really you have the creative freedom of creating whatever color you want. Look up some reference of how the hues in the eyes change. I like this maybe. And we can tweak this once we see our entire eye. Alright. So we're going to do the same here. We're going to make a frame. And I'm going to select these nodes, press Ctrl P. And then label that frame Iris. Cool. So now we need to add the eye white. So the white eyeball. So the way we're going to do this is just by adding, let's see here, another gradient texture. There's a lot of gradient textures going on. All right. And we want to put this on, linear is good. Let's Ctrl T. We want this to be generated. And we kind of want to rotate. I think on the Z, no, the X-axis, no. It's one of these. Oh yeah, it is Y-axis. I was right. So put the Y-axis on 90 degrees, so you have a gradient going from back to front. And all we need is a color ramp. And then we can make this go from a red color to white. Nice. Okay, maybe pump it up a little bit more. Add one in the middle and push that gradient a bit if you want to already be showing that on the edge of the eye. But this is really if you just need it popped out or anything. It's a small detail. So, of course, we also want to add a frame for those. Press Ctrl P and label this eye white. You can also just make this white if you want to keep your eye white. So now we can already assemble these pieces, right? What we're gonna do is add a color, mix RGB. I'm gonna check this, right? I'm gonna factor on 0. I'm gonna make this black. This is gonna be our iris. We don't need more for the, what am I saying? The lens. Or it's not even the lens, it's the pupil. There's a word. So this is just gonna be our pupil. It's just gonna be black, right? And then we wanna check our red channel and pump it into the mix. So now it's gonna look like this. Kind of weird. And then we want to pick our eye white here and pump it into the color. And the bottom color that is. So now we have our eye going from red to white, and then it stops where the iris is. We're just gonna duplicate this with Shift D. And for the second mix, we're gonna use green, and we're gonna make the result of this one in color 1. And in color 2, we're gonna pop our iris. Boom. This doesn't look half bad, but it still needs some details. So, I'm just gonna make some, I'm just gonna select these two frames, and just gonna make some room up here. And we're gonna add 2 details to really sell this as an eye. So, I'm gonna add another gradient texture. Where are you? There you are. All right. Press Ctrl T. Select this on the UV again. And again, put this on -0.5 to -0.5. And then, of course, we want to put this to spherical. Okay, so we have our sphere here again. And we can, of course, do the math thing again, where we math this to the power of 3. That's cool. Now we add a color ramp. And what we want to do here is add a lighter rim to the center of the iris. So we're just going to go pump this down to where the iris begins. Put the whites somewhere in the middle. Add another node, or another color rather. Put it like this. That should be good. So we have gradients in the iris. So what we can do now is after all our elements are joined here, or before. You can really choose. You can put it on the iris, just to be sure everything is in the correct order. So we add a mix RGB between the iris and where it gets added, and then I'm just gonna pop this one in here and put this on dodge. And then if you look at the result, well, let's look at the entire result. This is gonna add a small rim to the middle of the eye, right? Looks nice. It adds a little bit of flare, and you can, with this slider, just up and down, enable it or disable it. And if you want to shift it up or down a little bit, you can just move this one around. Nice. And that's a little bit of that much needed flare in eyes, right? We're just gonna parentheses add another frame. I'm gonna label that frame light rim. Of course, where there's light, there should also be dark. So I'm gonna duplicate this entire frame and not add it to the other frame. No. Okay, don't. Okay, good. So now, with this color map selected, we kind of want to do the inverse. So now we don't want to flip it. We want to go to the outer rim. That's here, right? You can enable wireframe again if you're having trouble finding it, like this. And then our whites we want to make black, and our blacks we want to make white. All right. Or we could just add an invert, but it doesn't really matter. All right. Cool. So it looks like this. Sweet. And now, just after we dodge the inner rim, I want to add another mix RGB and pop this one in. And this one we're going to put to multiply. If we look at our end result now, this adds a darker rim on the outside. Right? So if we push this up, it's going to add a bit of a darker rim. I kind of see that even on one, it's not that obvious. I want to go back here. I kind of want to push it a little more. Yeah, I can see this is just being added to the rim and not to the eye white. And this mostly gives correct results, but I'm kind of bothered by this gradient. So I'm going back to our red and green here, or divider. I'm just gonna push this a little bit together as well. I'm just gonna push a little bit outward. There we go. And you just have to tweak those settings until you have a desired result. You can also make the iris a bit smaller, or let's say sharper, rather. Because we still want to fit the model we made, right? Alright, this looks nice. Cool. Now, we just pop this all into the principled shader, into the base color. And we can remove this frame here. Then we have our eye inner. Alright, nice. You can maybe pump up the roughness a bit, because this doesn't really reflect a lot of light. So a last thing you can add for just a little bit more frame, for the inner eye that is, we'll get to the outer eye in a second. We'll just go to vector bump, and we're just gonna make a color mix RGB. We're gonna put in the before the color ramp here. We're gonna select our result of our noise and our Voronoi texture of the iris here. And we're just gonna put this, let's say on the second color node here, right? And on the first color node, we're gonna put our green channel. On the mix, we're gonna put our green channel, right? And then the color one, we'll just make white. And we're gonna pump this up into the height of the bump. So our bump now looks like this. It's a bit extreme. We're just, in our strength, gonna push this down by a lot. And there we go. And maybe even, if you have these weird artifacts, you can go to color, mix RGB, add, and then you can add a little bit of whiteness here so that it gets pushed out rather than pushed in, right? I just kind of want to tweak this a little bit. And then we can just punch this into the normal. And if we check it, all right, nice. And this adds just a little bit more texture to the eye. This looks nice. All right, so now we're gonna add the outer eye. So we're just gonna press Alt-H to enable our outer eye here again. I'm just gonna put this on Shade Smooth, go to New. And in our Principled BSDF, we want to change a couple of things. First, we want to put on the transmission because, of course, the outer eyeball is just going to be transmissive. And we want to put the IOR to 1.41, which is the IOR of your lens. It's the index of refraction. If you want to Google that, if you don't know what that is, it's important information for shaders. And then we want to put our roughness to a very low number, let's say 0.8 or something. Right, but now there's a problem. Within EEVEE, we don't have, this is gonna work in cycles, but we wanna make this work in EEVEE, of course. So we need to adjust some settings in the render settings. First, we wanna add screen space reflections and add refraction. And then we wanna go back to our shader here, into our settings, and we wanna enable screen space refraction. So now we added a nice outer sphere to our eye. And now you can play around with this. So if you just want to rig it, animate it. One thing is why I used the UV and not a procedural generated shader. It's actually because if we go into, if we hide our outer sphere for a second, and we select this, the edge around the lens, and we put it on proportional editing, just on smooth, and you see that you can actually move the pupil. So let's put this off, and the iris will stretch along with it. So doing this with generated textures is going to be a bit hard. But doing it this way really gives you a nice result. So you can put this on a shape key, right? You can have a shape key, make this really big, right? And then put some -1, and you can just play around with the eye, right? Cool. Duplicate your eye. I'm gonna make your second eye in here. Oh, nice. Oh, of course I want to make a new shader first. Make your second eye a nice color of brown. And you can go as funky. You can add extra gradients to this to really make it pop or something. You can shuffle these around. And that looks nice. So there you go. That's how you make procedural eyes. So, if you like this video, press the like button down below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button to get more tutorials like this. Also, if you want to check down in the description down below, you'll find my Patreon. On my Patreon, you can find perks like me giving art critique to one of your artworks or having a personal session with me to go over what you're having trouble with. And you can support me in making more videos. So, please check that out. Also, if you want to download this procedural eye file, just go to the Gumroad link down below. Thank you! Also, I want to personally thank Taylor Brown for supporting me on Patreon. Thank you, Taylor. You're a nice guy.